Powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. Now, live from inside the Matt Black Kia Studios. It's Football at 4.
Football at 4 powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. Andrew DiCecco from InsideTheBirds.com is here. New faces, same story, he writes. We'll talk about that story over at InsideTheBirds.com along with Eagles OTA today. Nick Sirianni did speak earlier this afternoon. Some interesting things there regarding wide receiver Quez Watkins. I know Andrew probably wants to discuss that and more right now on the Sports Bash. Sirianni also asked about Deandre Hopkins. He said, you never know. You never know, he kind of hinted at. Plus, Dalvin Cook apparently will become available. The Eagles did add running backs in the offseason, but Dalvin Cook, Andrew DiCecco, would he look good in Eagle Green, or is that probably not something that would fit at this stage of where they are?
Well, Dalvin Cook would look good in any uniform. He's that type of player that can transform your offense. But as far as being in midnight green, I just don't see it, given the resources that they've already allocated to the position.
Yeah, I mean, he's been a guy who's been hurt a lot. He's probably not the same player that he was. But, you know, you got Penny here, you got Swift here. I guess adding a player like Cook would just probably be too many mouths to feed, similar to if they decided to bring a guy like DeAndre Hopkins here. I mean, you just figure there's not enough footballs to throw around for A.J. Brown, Devonta Smith, Dallas Goedert, and if you thought about bringing Hopkins in, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I have to believe that DeAndre Hopkins and Dalvin Cook would both view themselves as being starters, and they want the lion's share of the touches, and that just wouldn't happen here in Philadelphia. But they're going to be a great addition for some team out there. I mean, obviously today, and we'll get into it, Nick Sirianni didn't rule out DeAndre Hopkins, as you already alluded to, but as we sort of outlined last week, I find that to be a little bit difficult to fathom.
Yeah, I don't know where all these guys would fit, you know, especially the wide receivers. You know, you got those three guys. But he did talk a little bit today, Nick Sirianni did, about Quez Watkins. And I know he's a guy over the years that you've really liked here. And he was asked, are there any individual players in the roles right now that have stood out? And he seemed to go out of his way to talk about Quez Watkins.
Well, it's not really surprising because over those 2 years, Nick Sirianni has singled out Quez Watkins a number of different times and just been very effusive in his praise for Quez. Obviously, he does a lot of things that Quez does a lot of things that Nick likes. He does have that speed. I think he's a coachable player, and Nick's a very hands-on type of coach. And I think that Quez probably takes to his, detailed approach, and I think that's something that really resonates with him. And I think that sort of translates to Nick Sirianni. But and he even called Quez the best number 2 receiver that he's coached, or has the potential to be at least, which I think was probably a little bit overindulgence. But, nevertheless, he's sort of giving him a lot of confidence going into a very crucial summer for Quez. Obviously, he had a hand in as many as 3 losses last year, which we talked about last week. And you wonder where his confidence is moving forward. Is he going to take some of those shortcomings and use it as motivational fuel to move forward and be the player that he was 2 seasons ago and really be and announce his presence as a bona fide number 3 on this football team? Or is he going to regress, and is that going to turn into a downward spiral? I guess we're going to have to see, but I like the words of encouragement from Sirianni, and I'm not really surprised by that vote of confidence.
Yeah, he definitely singled out Quez Watkins. Said, I love his attitude, and I've said this to him. I have no problem saying it here. Some people around here, and it's not in this building, we have a ton of confidence in Quez, and I guess the question is, you had a lot of confidence in Quez. Why would you go out and get, a player to play that spot? Competition's a good thing, right?
Yeah, competition's a good thing, and they really did need to fill out the depth chart. So I wouldn't necessarily read too much into it. Do I view Zacchaeus as a better slot receiver? Sure. Do I think he's a better overall receiver? Well, there are 2 different types of players. Zacchaeus is better in short areas. I think he's more sure-handed, but Quez also gives you that downfield dimension, that explosiveness down the field that teams have to account for. So it all depends on who really steps up and seizes the opportunity, because they both have different skill sets that I think translates well to the offense. I mean, I think Zacchaeus is a quarterback-friendly type of player that can really live over the middle of the field and thrive and be that safety valve for Jalen Hurts. But then again, the Eagles don't have anybody with the speed of a Quez Watkins on offense, and he can completely flip the game with one play. Now, obviously, he hurt them. that worked against him last year when he did have his opportunities. He hurt the team. But I think that both players offer something different, and competition, like you said, is the best formula for getting the most out of each player.
We're talking with Andrew DiCecco, Football 4 here on the Sports Pass Live, 97.3 ESPN. We talked about running back Dalvin Cook. Looks like he's going to be available, but he was asked today about Swift, Penny, Gainwell, Scott, and he went out of his way, too, to bring up Trey Sermon, Kennedy Brooks. But I know Sermon's a guy you have some interest in, but Swift and Penny and Gainwell and Scott, where does Sermon fit into that group? Do they only keep 4? How do you kind of read that running back group? Because both of us, I think, agree that while Cook is an awesome player, probably just not enough space in here. So how do you read the running back room?
It's going to be really interesting because right now, when you look at, I think the X factor, so to speak, in this position is Rashad Penny. And we've already outlined the injury history and things like that. And obviously there's a little bit of a risk there, but he provides a dimension that you're not going to find elsewhere on the depth chart. And he can be the power runner, so you're not having to rely on your quarterback to get those tough yards in critical moments, which I thought the Eagles had to lean on Hurts too much, and that exposes your quarterback, who they just heavily invested into potential injury. So Rashad Penny, and he also is not just limited to the short yardage potential. I think he does have some burst and acceleration, but also gives you a bigger body that can do some different things. So to me, he's the X factor. But I think DeAndre Swift's going to be the focal point, particularly in the passing game. And I mean, you also want to be, you have 2 running backs atop the depth chart, right, that have an extensive injury history. So you don't want to overuse them. So I think you can spread out the touches, maybe 10 to 12 for each player, and sprinkle in a little Kenny Gainwell, and you have Boston Scott on reserve primarily as your kick returner. But I don't know that there's going to be a bell cow running back. I think you're going to see differing. You're going to see them implemented differently, depending on the opposition and the game plan. And you could see a guy like Rashad Penny take a series. You could see DeAndre Swift play most of a half. Like, I don't know if there's going to be a rhyme or reason to it, but I think they're going to spread out their touches to maximize their health and the offense's potency.
Yeah, we got a lot going on right now because of OTAs and the linebacking crew. I was talking with Jeff yesterday about this. I want to get your thoughts on it. You got 2 new tackles, or 2 new D linemen, Carter and Jordan Davis to some extent is going to get more snaps, we think, than he did last year. You have 2 new linebackers, brand new. Nakobe Dean played about 30 snaps last year, and obviously Mora was not here. And then you have 2 new safeties. Don't know who they're going to be, but you're going to have 2 new starters. Of the groups of 2, which one do you have the most concern about?
Well, the most concern, I mean, the numbers and the would seem to indicate that it would be safety, but I say linebacker, right? I mean, and I've written about this. It came out yesterday. They're putting a lot on Nakobe Dean's plate, and obviously this is a player who is immensely talented, was a focal point on a historic Georgia defense, but he's only played 34 snaps last season. He was a special teamer primarily, and you're giving him the green dot, which is a responsibility exclusively reserved for one player on defense to be in constant contact with the coaching staff on the field. So he's inheriting that, which was, TJ Edwards, that was his role last year. So they're placing a lot on Nakobe Dean's shoulders. And then opposite him, Nicholas Morrow is he's a solid, if unspectacular player. They're both really small. They're like about 225, so you wonder how they're going to hold up in the run game. I think they offer a lot of fluidity and athleticism at the second level in terms of pass coverage and sideline-to-sideline range. But you wonder if they're not able to be kept clean, how are they going to be able to consistently disengage from blocks? I mean, that's a legitimate concern right up the middle of your defense.
Yeah, you wrote about the linebacking crew, and you said it remains the biggest question mark. I know we're not learning a lot about this crew, but we know Nakobe Dean is kind of wearing the green dot, and it kind of says in these OTAs that the one thing we've learned is that's one guy they seem to trust.
Absolutely, and one of the things that really jumped out when I was scouting Nakobe Dean during the pre-draft process a couple of seasons ago is just how smart, how fundamentally sound he is. He's always at the right place at the right time. He always finds a way to make a play. You couldn't watch a Georgia game without seeing Nakobe Dean flash. And I just think that he is such an instinctive player and incredibly has such a high football intellect that right away, it was so apparent to, obviously to Sean Desai to be like, this is the guy that I want to be in communication with because I think that he can be the quarterback of your defense. Now, there are some, with that, there are, some concerns. You look at his size and you look at his lack of experience and also the depth and talent around him at the position. You wonder how he's going to be able to hold up for a full 17-game slate. And also, should he need a blow or something to that effect, who's going to be able to come in and provide competent snaps? It's kind of tough to place all your eggs in one basket for a player who's a second year, he's 22 years old, you give him the green dot, and he hasn't done it yet at the professional level.
Yeah, we got that and Morrow was saying earlier this week, too, about how he said situational, being around Sean Desai, he has learned more about situational football more in these OTAs. I thought that, this is something we don't hear all that much, right? Situational football. But he said he's learned more about that in the last OTAs than he did in 6 years in the league. I thought that was a very eye-opening comment about how Sean Desai may be a little bit more detail-oriented.
That was one of the things that really jumped out when I heard Nicholas Morrow talk, and that's just one of those things that, yes, detail-oriented, that really jumped out as far as Sean Desai being very meticulous and making sure that all the details, you understand the why, right? I mean, I mentioned that when they hired him, that in Chicago, a lot of players really liked him because he would always explain the why. He was very focused on the details and situational football and things like that. So you're going to see I think you're going to see a much more structured and a defense that's equipped to handle certain situations. Whereas last year, this seemed like they were on their heels, and when they were reeling, it seemed like you didn't know where they were going to be able to make up their ground. But right now, I think that Sean Desai, everything we've heard in the early going, he's just a really good teacher, and I think that his mindset and what he looks for in players really translates to what Nakobe Dean does well. So I'm not surprised that there's already an affinity there and a cohesiveness.
We're talking about linebackers. Tell us a little bit about Christian Ellis, who was kind of the star of the linebacking group today because he picked off Jalen Hurts, cut under Jack Stahl, picked off a pass. Hurts, by the way, threw 2 picks in a 3-play span, one of them from Christian Ellis. The other one was basically, it looked like an undrafted rookie, Mekhi Gardner, blanketed Zacchaeus and got a pick.
Yeah, Garner was a player that, while everybody was talking about Eli Ricks, Garner was a player that I had penciled in as somebody to keep an eye on this summer. But, Christian Ellis, he's a player that I really like, and he's entering his 3rd season, undrafted free agent out of Idaho. He was with the Minnesota Vikings, and the Eagles have been sort of developing him over the past couple of seasons. And he's just a really tough, tenacious player. You saw him invigorate a stagnant special teams when he was promoted from the practice squad in Week 13 against the Titans. And he's an athletic player. And while he only played 22 snaps last season on defense, I think he exhibited translatable traits enough so where you think you may have something there. Now, right now, as it stands, he's the number 3 linebacker, the 3rd guy. So I think that's awfully ambitious to sort of think that he can do that without having such a larger, more substantial body of work. But I think that he's a player that the Eagles really like and they feel confident in. And I think that you would like to see the Eagles add another player to the position there to incite some competition. Don't just want to hand it to him. But I think Christian Ellis is going to have a spot and a role on this team, and everything that you've seen seems to point that way.
Sirianni was asked today about what stood out so far about Carter and Jalen Carter and Nolan Smith, the 2 rookies. Everybody always likes to hear about the young guys. Hard to see without the pads, but I think what he kind of exemplified is their athletic ability and just how much these guys jump off the field even without their pads on, which obviously gets you excited to see them. But, Jalen Carter, Nolan Smith, I know this is OTAs and you're just in this no pads out here, but Nolan Smith, we're hearing a lot about Carter, the strength that he has. Just what those 2 players could add to this defense is really interesting to kind of think about at this stage, just seeing their athletic ability and drill work here.
Yeah, absolutely. I think both players are going to have an early impact this season, and I think Nolan Smith might be the best value pick in the entire draft, and he looks a little bit bigger than what he looked like at the NFL Combine. And so I think that there was, all that deliberation about his size, is it going to translate? I think that was much ado about nothing. I think that he's going to be just fine as a situational pass rusher early. But in looking at Jalen Carter, I think that he's going to end up splitting time with Fletcher Cox early on. But he's so refined, I think, as a player that I wouldn't be surprised if you see him start to supplant Fletcher Cox and really take over and take ownership of that defensive tackle.
Well, let me interject. If he's rotating or splitting time with Fletcher Cox, who's getting? How do you see that configuration? Do you see somebody else getting? Who's getting the other snaps if he's rotating with Fletcher?
I would think that Jordan Davis, being the former first-round pick, you're going to want to try and roll him out there and get everything you can out of him. And
so you're talking about more of a four-man front.
Yes, yeah.
Gotcha.
Just to clarify, more of a four-man look.
Gotcha. Moshe and I were talking yesterday about the configuration, and I don't see if you agree. I don't know about the side. We don't know much, but does he want to give those five-man look where you have Fletcher, Jordan Davis, and Carter, and Jordan Davis is on the nose?
I think that you're going to see a whole amalgam of different looks from Sean Desai. They're being very secretive in what he's going to do and what he's going to run. You don't hear a lot of guys talking much about what they're going to be asked to do, but I think you're going to see a number of looks, and they're going to try and get their best pass rushers on the field. It wouldn't surprise me if you see those type of looks with Jordan Davis at the nose, and you could even see different guys. Obviously, we haven't even talked about Josh Sweat, but you could even see a guy like Contavious Street if he makes the team. He provides a little bit of juice there. So they have such a wealth of talent there and a really healthy and deep bench. So I think it's going to be really interesting to see how he chooses to deploy them.
Yeah, very much so. A lot of stuff happening. This is the last day, by the way, for Eagles OTAs. They kind of go away for a little bit, and then we'll be getting to training camp. And, of course, Andrew and I will be talking football at 4. We'll start to look at the divisions as these teams start to put together their runs for the 2024 season. And the Eagles, of course, by many accounts, the favorite in the NFC. We were talking about this yesterday with Moshe. I'll get your take on it. If the Eagles are the clear-cut favorite, who is number 2 for you?
In the entire NFC?
NFC, yep.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think the Saints might be a sneaky team this year.
They're not number 2, though. It could be your number 2. I don't want to put words in your mouth.
The 49ers, probably.
Yeah, 49ers would probably be that next team. A lot of people like the Lions. I guess Dallas is still in the mix.
But I'm not.
You're not a Lions guy. I know that.
Nah, I think that's a trendy pick right now. But I think a team that could be a sleeper this year and one to watch could be the New Orleans Saints. But right now, I would probably say number 2 is the Niners. It's kind of hard not to put them there, but
yeah.
I'm
okay with Saints as a sleep, like you're saying. I agree with you there, but as the number 2 team in the conference, I don't know if I'm ready to go to that notoriety.
Well, look, they got the 49ers, as good as they are, they got to be able to. Brock Purdy's got to be able to show that he can do it again, right? And it wasn't just a flash in the pan. They have some questions there at the quarterback position. They're going to have to get ironed out. So I don't think that's a slam dunk either.
Yeah, listen, and I agree with you that the Saints, with Carr, I think in that division, you go down to that South, he might be the best quarterback in that division. That is a division that's just filled with question marks.
Yeah, so I do think that, while on the surface it would seem the Niners, I think it might be a little bit closer than it appears.
All right, we've got the end of OTAs, and football is a little bit in the forefront here as the summer gets here, but looking forward to training camp now as the Eagles OTAs come to a close. Andrew DiCecco for Football at 4. Make sure you check out InsideTheBirds.com and the Inside the Birds podcast. Those guys are still putting out a lot of great off-season content, and we'll continue to talk about it right here on Football at 4 on the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN. Andrew, have a beer on me, buddy.
Appreciate the time, Mike. Have a good one.
As always, Andrew DiCecco live.